Thanks to those joining me live and to those that'll be joining me on archive. D-Style Boxing here. I am joined by Joe Habib. What's up, Beeb?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? For those listening on archive, leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Take a moment. Thumbs up the video. So check it out. All right? Now, before we get started, Joe, real quick, let people know where they can find you and the Ringside Reporter show you do and all that.
Yeah, beatingtheodds@beeb.com. Beating the Odds at Beeb is my YouTube channel. You can catch me on Twitter at jbeeb1. Catch me on Facebook at Joe Habib, Google Plus, LinkedIn, and we do the Ringside Reporter podcast every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we basically recap the weekend of boxing and preview upcoming fights and upcoming news and rumors and all that stuff.
Well, there you go. That's Beating the Odds with Beeb. And when you go to his channel, hit that notification button. That way you're notified when his show comes on live. That's on Sundays, right?
That's correct.
Well, there you go. And hit the notification button for my channel, too. All right. Well, that's it. And let's get to this really quick. And then, by the way, that's for all those boxing fans out there. So check this out. All right. Before we even get to the Montreal Screw Job, you know, everyone has different opinions on this. This thing happened back in 1997, and they're still talking about it. Just in general, Joe, what's your overall? Like, I know your take, but tell the audience what your take on Bret the Hitman Hart is. Well, what's your overall, in general, take on Bret Hart?
Well, I thought Bret Hart was a good wrestler. Wasn't really one of my favorites because I always liked wrestlers that could wrestle but could talk too. And I used to follow wrestling real closely back then, back in the days where they used to have the Monday Night Raw and the Monday Night Nitro. And it would be coined the phrase of the Monday Night Wars, they used to say back then, because the two shows were on at the same time and they were competing against each other. But the thing is most people flicked back and forth
yeah.
You know, most people watched both, and you know, everyone had an opinion on what they liked better. And for a period of time, I did like that WCW better. But you know, Bret Hart was a big part of both of them, actually. Well, not so much WCW, but he ended up going over there anyways. And like I said, Bret Hart was a good wrestler, not one of my favorites. You know, I like the guys that could talk. I like the guys who were kind of like high flyers sometimes too. I like guys who are versatile. And Bret Hart was good at what he did, but he had his limitations, just like a lot of wrestlers do. But they find that one angle, and they get over with that one angle, and they become popular. Bret Hart, no question, had a great career. How many times WWE champion was he? Like 5 or 6 times, was it?
I believe 4 times, but this was at a time where there was one champion, really, and you held the title for a while, yeah.
Yeah, he was a tag team champion as well with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. So he had a good career, but you know, what happened to him in WCW when Goldberg ended up injuring him? It was pretty sad. It was a travesty, and I actually felt bad for him when that happened. But you know, he's become very bitter over the years, and he's very critical of a lot of wrestlers, particularly Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. And some of the criticism is justified, and some of the criticism just comes off as being just pure bitterness and hatred. You know, and he just seems like, even though the great career he's had, just doesn't seem to be happy at the end of the day when it comes to wrestling. And again, my heart goes out to him when he lost his brother, Owen, in that incident. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. How that situation was handled, and obviously the Montreal Screw Job, where we're going to talk about that later, and I'll give you my opinion on that later. But I think Bret Hart, in my opinion, had a hard time separating the business from the personal when it came to his character. He actually, I think, believed in his character too much, and I think because of that, he didn't want to put other people over. And a lot of wrestlers are very selective on who they put over, you know, given where they are in their careers. And that has a lot to do with it. I understand that. But I think at the time, when he was supposed to put people over. I think it was would have been good for the business, and he always seemed to be resistant to doing that. He always seemed to have a problem doing that, and he didn't want to put Shawn Michaels over because he didn't like Shawn Michaels personally. But at the time, that was good for business. That made sense to do that. I think it would have been the right move to do so. And you could say there were times when Hogan didn't want to put people over because when he got his creative control and this and that. But Hogan did put a lot of people over. He put the Warrior over when he had to. He put Flair over when he had to at one point. Put The Rock over when he had to. He has a history of putting people over. You know, and it is what it is. But I think Bret Hart, like I said, took things to heart too much. I think he wanted people to actually believe wrestling was real when it's not real, and he would get offended by it, and I think he was stuck in the old school type of era, and I don't think he ever evolved with the times. Whereas other guys were more innovative, and they developed their characters, and Hogan went from good guy, went from face to heel, and he did it beautifully. Same thing with Kevin Nash, Diesel, Kevin Nash, same thing. So I just think that Bret Hart in recent years has come off as being very bitter and kind of coming off as being a hater, but that doesn't take away from the great things he did in the sport. Definitely a WWE Hall of Famer, definitely a guy that has had a great career, as I said, and he deserves a lot of respect in the business for what he's done in his accomplishments.
Well, let me give my thoughts on Bret Hart real quick. So Bret Hart is no secret is my favorite wrestler of all time, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
So, and that's a disclosure that has to be said, right? Because people have to know that, right? So, especially going into a debate. But with that said, I still believe I'll be objective, but just want to put that out there. Now, in respects to Bret Hart, I mean, one, you're right. What happened with him with Bill Goldberg, that was a travesty, and that should have never have happened. And it is kind of ironic because Bret Hart himself, and he's proud of this, he never injured anybody in the ring. In fact, he took pride in never injuring anybody, and he feels strongly about wrestlers taking care of other wrestlers in the ring, because at the end of the day, you're giving your body to somebody, and everybody wants to go back home to their families once the night is over, So that's as far as I think he was a really good technical wrestler. I think he was really good at telling stories in the ring. I think Bret's aware that wrestling isn't real. He understands that it's an art and it's theater. I think he's gone on record to say that. Where I think what you're mentioning is when he says things that even I'll agree with that sound a little like eyebrow raising. They'll raise an eyebrow is when he says things like, "I'm a Canadian hero," and in his hometown he's popular because he was a wrestler. I don't know if he's a hero. I mean, I'm not going to speak for the people of Calgary, but I think hero is a strong word for professional wrestler. And also wrestlers that have gone to his home, and there's posters of, he has pictures of himself all over the house,
everywhere.
Yeah. So I get that. You know what I mean? That is a little weird, but as far as him being a professional in the ring, I think he's there. I do strongly disagree with. I mean, look, I'm not saying that there was never a time where Bret Hart didn't want to play ball. And we're going to get to the big one, okay, in the Montreal Screw Job. But this is a guy who, I mean, for those familiar with X-Pac, when he was a 1-2-3 kid, he was nobody. And Bret Hart was the world champion. And on Monday Night Raw, you don't necessarily have to lose to somebody to put him over, okay? But when you're the world champion and you're facing this in the storyline, it's a huge underdog that it's just jobbing every week. But you have him take you to the limit, and to a point where Bret even let him pin him 1, 2, 3. or actually, no, I'll take that back. Bret pinned him 1, 2, 3, but he had his foot on the rope, so he told the ref the foot was on the rope, so please continue the match or whatnot. So at the end of the day, I think he did put Kid over in that sense. And Kid has done multiple interviews talking about that. Putting Shawn Michaels over, he put him over in WrestleMania 12. I mean, he put him over clean too. Okay, 1, 2, 3 in the mat, no dispute. In the Iron Man match. So he had put him over, and the deal was that Shawn Michaels was going to return a favor, which he never did. Okay, he never returned a favor. We'll get to that in a moment, but other cases, Bret Hart was made promises that never happened. He was told, Hulk Hogan's going to put you over at SummerSlam, so we need you to, what we're going to do is we're going to use Yokozuna as a transitional champion. We're going to have him cheat to beat you. Hogan's going to take the belt from him that same night. But don't worry about it. Hogan's on his way out. He's going to go to Hollywood and all that. He's going to put you over at SummerSlam. They had the posters ready. The magazines were out there. That was set for SummerSlam of that year, right? I don't remember the year exactly, but it was SummerSlam of that year. And unfortunately, Hulk Hogan decided that he was not, and on record, that he was not going to put Bret Hart over, right? He was not going to work with Bret Hart whatsoever. He would rather put Yokozuna over than a midget over, in Hulk Hogan's own words, right? Now, it is true that Bret was considered quote-unquote small for that era, but it's still, to me, something to behold when it comes to Hogan. There's a lot of stories of Hogan refusing to put anybody over. At age like almost 60, in his 60s, he didn't want to put over freaking Randy Orton at SummerSlam, who was coming out being the youngest champion of all time. He refused to put him over. He refused to put multiple people over on his way out. Sure, he put over The Rock when he was trying to get in Vince's good side. He put over Goldberg, but he ended up getting the title back in a couple months. So there was always something in it for Hogan when he put somebody over. Right now, we could argue that's a whole other story, and Hogan was a big name, perhaps the biggest name of all time. But I think if we're going to label somebody, not wanting to put people over, I think Hogan would be a much better person to put in that bucket over Bret Hart. But that's just my opinion. Now, before we go to Montreal, did you want to respond to any of that?
Very good rebuttal. Very strong rebuttal. I actually forgot about when he did put Shawn Michaels over that one time. When he lost to Shawn Michaels, when Shawn Michaels became a champion. I forgot about that. So that's a good point. And promises get made and they don't get returned. It happens to a lot of wrestlers. You know what it is? I think
Do you think he wasn't good at being the backstage politician?
You know what I think is? I think that once he had something set in his mind, I don't think he could be reasoned. I don't think he could be reasoned with to change it. In other words, I think that he wanted wrestling to be the way he wanted it to be. He didn't like when it was changing, the Attitude Era, right, and when things got vulgar. You know what I'm saying? Like he just wanted it to stay stuck in the Jimmy Superfly Snooker days, the Iron Sheik days, and he didn't evolve. And to be quite frank, I didn't like all that stuff. Some of that stuff from the Attitude Era. When Vince would have the female wrestlers, get stripped down in bikinis and be half naked. And
Joe has to say that. That's what that is, guys. All right. Go ahead.
And then he would have people pull his pants down, have people kiss his ass and stuff like that. Right. I think they kind of went, because the thing is kids watched it. A lot of kids watched it. A lot of kids.
You're right.
And I just thought it was the wrong. So in that regard, I understood it to some degree, but he didn't really like how, when if you watch Monday Night Raw, a lot of it became, if you really looked and look and see how wrestling changed. In other words, go back. I don't know. You probably won't remember the Jimmy Superfly Snuka days.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was back the '70s, late '70s, early '80s, whatever. And you go back and watch those shows compared to the Monday Night Raw shows of the '90s, and how much actual wrestling was done in those Monday Night Raw shows
Yeah.
and the WCW shows. There's a lot of talking, a lot of skits.
Yeah.
And back in the '70s and '80s, you know, there was just mostly wrestling. And I don't think Bret liked that part of it because that wasn't his forte, talking a lot. So I just think that he was less flexible as time went on and the business changed as opposed to other wrestlers. Can you think that's a fair assessment or no?
Yeah, he was definitely. I'll say that he was out of place because Bret was there when the Attitude Era. It wasn't called Attitude yet, but it was basically had already started. And to me, look, I understand people are like, well, that's what they have to do to survive. I get it, but however, there's nuance to everything. Like Shawn Michaels didn't have to on live TV motion with his hands like he's sucking a penis. I highly doubt that if he never did that WCW would have won the Monday Night War, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that had happened, and Bret, that famous thing where he went up to Vince and told him, "What the fuck is this shit?" Right on live TV. He probably picked the wrong time to bring that up to Vince, right? And he went on TV and he just didn't like the way Hunter and Triple H, that is, and Shawn Michaels were acting on TV. You know, he didn't like the whole DX thing. He didn't like the suck it thing. He didn't like the homosexual references they were making. I think he even called them homos at one point on live TV. So he was definitely out of place, and he did not like the direction that the business was going in. And to be honest with you, a lot of that has to do with number one, with Vince Russo. And the truth is, WWE wouldn't be like a public traded company like it is now, making record-breaking profits, if it would have stayed in that attitude realm. It just wouldn't have happened. They didn't have as many sponsors back then as they do now, for understandable reasons. But back to Bret, I just feel like he felt out of place, and it felt like his era was gone. It wasn't the Bret Hart era anymore. It was clear that Stone Cold was going to take the mantle. I think he knew that. I think Vince knew that, and I think that's why he ended up in WCW. I think WCW misused him, but that's a whole other story, right? Which we could even touch on, but I do agree that he was. I would say he was out of place for the direction that it was going. But I'll also say this though: 1997 Bret Hart, whether it was intentional or not, to me it was honestly great TV. Okay, because when he was going out there, maybe he meant it, or maybe that's why it came out so good. But when he would come out and talk about how, you know, you guys are cheering for dudes that chant "suck it" and throw middle fingers, and I'm here being a good role model, and you boo me. This is the problem with America, and it just sold so well. The heat he was getting was just great. So I think it was great TV, to be honest with you. In '97 with Bret Hart, I think it was his best year on the mic.
Yeah, it was a good year for him, no question.
I just don't think he meant. I think he meant it though. I think he was serious.
You know, and that's the thing. I think sometimes it's good when you. There's a pro and con to believing in your character, because when you really believe in your character, you're putting your heart and soul into it, and it really comes off as you can sell yourself real well,
right,
to the viewing audience when you're able to capture your character like that. And
well, that's good acting, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
But the problem is though, like, let's say, you know, like who's a good actor? Let's say Denzel Washington, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Or let's say Will Smith, right? let's say Will Smith, he played Muhammad Ali, right? So we all know who Will Smith is, and we could, whether people, let's just say he had a great performance as Muhammad Ali, and you could feel like he had such a great performance. What you don't want is when the cameras are off and he's just a regular dude walking the streets, still referring to himself as Muhammad Ali. You know, like you don't want him to refer to, like, to still actually believe he's that character.
Correct.
And to give you an example of wrestlers, you know, believing their own, the smell of their own of their own shit. Stone Cold, you remember that segment where he threw the middle fingers at Tyson and Tyson shoved him?
Yeah.
Right. So that it's debated to this day whether or not that was planned, right? We really don't know. But I think it was, to be honest with you, but who knows? But Paul Heyman tells a story about Stone Cold and asking him, "Hey man, weren't you like scared to go up to Mike Tyson and at that time and tell him you'll beat his ass and throw, like, even though Tyson knows it's a show, but aren't you kind of concerned, like, if you throw middle fingers in his face, of what would happen?" And Stone Cold honestly answered back to Paul. He said, I wasn't thinking. And in that moment, I was Stone Cold. I wasn't Steve. You know, I was that character. Like, I believed I could beat up Mike Tyson at that time. You know, he kind of admits he would delude himself while being in that character.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's why Stone Cold was such a popular character. You know, people gravitated towards it. But he understands that's not who he is when he's no longer performing. You know what I mean? So I think it's a fine line there. But let's go ahead and talk about the Montreal Screw Job. For those that don't know, this is what happened, right? Long story short, Vince screwed Bret. But what is your version of the story, Joe? What's your version of the story?
Well, it's hard to really figure out who's telling, you know, the 100% truth in the whole situation or not. It's really hard to figure it out. But apparently, Bret had agreed with Vince that wasn't it supposed to be like a disqualification that he lost, and he would still keep his belt. He would lose the match, but he'd lose by count out or disqualification, right, or something like that. That was the original agreement. And then Vince was like, well, you know, he had second thoughts. Well, you know, I don't want you to be able to, you know, still take that belt over to WCW with you when you leave. And I guess, didn't Hogan take his belt, or didn't Flair take the belt with him? Flair was in WWE, and then he went back to WCW and he took the belt with him, the WWE belt with him, whatever. And I think, you know, Vince didn't want a similar situation happening. But I, to this day, still couldn't figure out why he would think Bret would do that, because Bret's never had a problem with him. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's always been. So maybe I could never figure out how he would kind of conflate the two situations, but he did for whatever reason. So Vince was kind of concerned about that. So then he tried to talk Bret out of it. I believe he wanted him to actually lose the match. And they were kind of going back and forth on it, and then Vince just gave in and said, "Okay, Bret, we'll do the finish the way you want it." And then at the last minute, when the match was going on and it was time for the finish to happen, Vince basically had Shawn Michaels and the referee count him out, or was it a submission or something like that? He put him in there or whatever, and they just stopped the match like he submitted, but he really didn't even submit. Right. Because he put him in his own sharpshooter, if I remember correctly.
The match was supposed to still go on for like another 50 minutes.
Yeah, the match was supposed to still go on. Yeah, this match was still supposed to go on. It was supposed to be some type of disqualification or something like that, or people were supposed to come in and break it up when he had him in that or whatever, and then Bret Hart would get disqualified. That's what I believe the exact finish was. If I'm
now, so some interesting stories here. I don't know why Vince. I mean, I understand when people tell me, well, Vince couldn't possibly take the risk, right? Okay, I get it. So if that's the case, right? Because everyone knows, like everybody knows this, right? Shawn Michaels in reality is a fucking wimp. Okay, he got his ass whooped, okay, by some Marine or something at a bar, right? So if they went to a shoot, and that means real fight in wrestling, what was Vince gonna do? Like, what if Bret Hart beat up Shawn Michaels for real on TV and then went to WCW? I mean, that would be a worse look than the alternative. Okay, I mean, in my opinion. Okay, but several things that were presented to Vince, believe it or not. I mean, I don't know what route you would have taken, B, but I just want to know what you think about this scenario. So I believe it was Jim Cornette that told Vince, because everybody was honestly annoyed with both Bret and Shawn, right? At this point, nobody liked any of them. Okay, but they understood that one of them was leaving, one of them was staying. But anyway, Jim Cornette told him weeks before. He told him, "Look, just do this. If he doesn't want to give up the belt, put him in there against Ken Shamrock and tell him play ball, or he's going to play ball with you, and that's it, right?"
So in other words, have Ken Shamrock fight him for real.
No, have a worked match, but Bret knows if Bret doesn't want to play ball, then, you know, it's that old Bruno story, you know, and it hasn't been done in a long time in wrestling, but if nothing is really stopping the dude from fighting the other dude for real, like, you know what I mean? It's like nothing's really stopping him, like in all reality. So the idea was, look, do a worked match, right? But and Bret's going to have to lose 1, 2, 3, or Ken Shamrock's going to beat him for real, and that's it. So that was one proposition, right? Bret Hart presented Vince with other propositions. He told Vince, I'll lose to Stone Cold. He told Vince, I'll lose to anybody else. I just won't lose to Shawn Michaels. That's what he told Vince. But Vince was hell-bent. It has to be Shawn Michaels, and it has to be in Canada, right? I mean, it's... Now, I understand from an outsider's perspective, like, who gives a shit if it's in Canada, right? I get it, right? Whether it's in Canada or Chicago, who the hell cares? You're leaving, Bret. You got to drop the belt to Shawn. I understand that argument 100%, right? But I just want to put some context and some events that followed throughout the months, right? Just so we could put ourselves in Bret Hart's shoes and ask ourselves, what if you can at least tell yourself, yeah, I kind of get why Bret didn't want to put this guy over, right? Number one, Bret put over Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 12 in the Iron Man match. That's number one. It was agreed that Shawn Michaels was going to return the favor the following year, right? That was the agreement. Shawn Michaels was supposed to carry that belt for the whole year, and they were going to have the rematch, and Bret's going to win. That was the agreement between him and Vince McMahon and Shawn as well. Shawn Michaels, right, coincidentally ended up having, like, he lost his smile and he quit due to depression, and in reality got his ass kicked in a bar, okay? He had a quote-unquote ankle injury while he was doing moonsaults off the top turnbuckle, right? I mean, this dude clearly had no intentions. He never lost the belt. He had to vacate it. It happened twice, right? He never wanted to put anybody over. No one, right? And Bret Hart was the leader of that locker room. So in his mind, I have to show this kid that he needs to play ball and he needs to put people over, right? Now, before another event that happened, right? Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. You're familiar with him?
Yes.
Okay. Passed away years back. Was addicted to painkillers and stuff like that. But
yeah,
the British Bulldog was the brother-in-law of Bret Hart, right? Bret Hart, or not Bret Hart, I'm sorry, British Bulldog was going to wrestle Shawn Michaels, okay, in the United Kingdom. All right. And weeks in advance, WWE, Vince told British Bulldog, you're going to go over. You're going to beat Shawn Michaels in England. Okay, this is what he was told, right? Now, we know it's all a work and all that, but in that work, British Bulldog is telling the newspapers and everybody's dedicating this match to his sister. His sister is dying of cancer, okay? So he's telling everybody, hey, tune into this event. I'm dedicating it to my sister. My sister's going to be there front row, okay?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
The day of the match, okay? British Bulldog is approached. Shawn doesn't want to put you over, so you're going to have to go ahead and put him over. British Bulldog does it, but let's not act like that this wasn't something that Bret Hart had in mind here. I'm pretty sure that kind of stung, and this was family here, okay? This guy is still not putting people over. And not only that, he is failing as champion, and he's quote-unquote getting injured or getting depressed while the company needs him and while they're getting their ass kicked by WCW. So what happens? They end up giving the belt to The Undertaker as a transition, okay? And then Bret Hart gets the championship, okay? I think Sid got it, and then The Undertaker, then Bret. But anyway, Vince went with Bret because whether it was The Undertaker, whether it was Sid, whether it was Shawn Michaels, they were getting their ass kicked in the ratings, right? So he's like, you know what? We're going to have to default to Bret again. They go with Bret, right? Bret is champion for a while, for a couple of months. Vince has months in advance. Vince knows, okay, that he wants out of the contract that he himself offered Bret. So for those that don't know, about a year before that, Bret Hart was offered a huge deal by WCW. WCW offered Bret the Hitman Hart $2.9 million a year. Bret could have done what Razor Ramon, Diesel, and all these other dudes did, and he could have just gone over there. But Bret didn't do that. What Bret did, instead of just giving a 2 weeks notice and saying peace, right? Bret went to Vince, and he told Vince, look, I want to stay with you. I know you can't beat this deal, but offer me something reasonable and I'll stay. Vince offered him $1.5 million a year, okay, for 20 years. I don't know why Vince offered him a 20-year deal, okay, but that's what he did, right? Bret took it. He said yes to the deal. That was the contract. In the contract, he also had creative control, right? Now, one could say, well, why should he have creative control? Vince agreed to give him creative control. He signed the contract. Now, fast forward, Vince is having money trouble, right? The company's not doing well. WCW is whooping their ass week in, week out. The pay-per-views aren't selling like they used to. WCW is taking all the talent, but he can't afford Bret anymore. He makes the determination that he cannot afford Bret Hart. And if he pays Bret Hart $1.5 million, he's gonna have to pay everybody else, close to that. Shawn Michaels working for $700,000. When it comes time to renew his contract, you think he's gonna want less than 1.5? Hell no. Not if Bret Hart's walking around 1.5 a year. Right? So anyway, Vince wants out of the contract. Not Bret. Bret's not the one that left. And this is what people don't understand. He didn't say, you know what, Vince, I want to leave. That's not what he said. Vince told him, look, I want out of this contract. I can't afford it. All right? Vince admits this. He said he wanted to keep Bret, but he couldn't afford Bret. Out of his own mouth, that's what Vince said. Now, with that said, Vince, however, doesn't have anybody better at that moment to put the belt on other than Bret. That's why he has Bret with a title at that time. Right? He gives Bret permission. He says, you can't really do this, but obviously I went out of the contract, so talk to Eric Bischoff, negotiate a good deal. So that's what Bret does. Bret negotiates a deal. He gets I think $3 million deal with Time Warner to go ahead and go to WCW. he's not supposed to start until 98, like early 98, late 97. For whatever reason, Vince McMahon Vince could have ended the contract whenever he wanted. As soon as he could have told Bret, okay, we're gonna end the contract until WrestleMania. He could have ended it whenever he wanted, but he wanted Bret out of there as soon as Bret got the contract. Okay. So with WCW. So my question would be, why was Vince, isn't it at least fair to say, I should say, that Vince really mishandled this whole situation? Like, he could have had the belt off of Bret months before that, right? He could have kept Bret as champion until the end of the year. He could have had Stone Cold beat Bret Hart at WrestleMania 14. You know, I just don't understand why Vince just had to do it at Survivor Series at Montreal, right? And if Bret, using his creative control, says, look, I don't want to lose to Shawn Michaels. I just don't like the guy. He never returned me my favor. He never put me over. Okay, so why should I put him over? I'll put anybody else over, but not Shawn Michaels. And then, not only on top of all this, even after all that, Bret Hart agreed for, now I think it's a terrible booking decision, but they had agreed to end the match as a draw. And then the following night on Raw, Michaels beats him clean, right? And come on, they needed a big match on Monday Night Raw. They were getting their ass whooped in the ratings, right? Shawn Michaels could have beaten him clean, 1, 2, 3. The following night at Raw, when it's not in Canada, and then Bret Hart can leave. Bret Hart, and for those that don't know, and Eric Bischoff has even come out and said this, Bret Hart couldn't go to WCW with a WWE title, even if he wanted to. He couldn't do it. Because it was up to Vince as to when the contract was going to end. Vince had to terminate the contract, even if Bret Hart signed off on it, to go to WCW. So with that said, is it fair to say that Vince mishandled the situation? Or that he could have done better?
Maybe, but the thing was if you went by what Bret Hart wanted to do, you just said it wasn't really a good storyline, right? So essentially, it wasn't really the right thing to do at the particular time. So could he have had the belt taken off him months before? Probably, but they didn't know when he was going to actually leave. It wasn't decided yet. So why was there a sense of urgency to get that belt off him, number one? And number two, again, it wasn't Bret's suggestion. Really wasn't a good suggestion. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do. It would have been better to have it done Vince's way. And one thing you could say about Vince, and most wrestlers will tell you about this, he's a genius. He knows how to really create a story. He has a lot of great ideas. He knows how to build people and build characters up. And he's great at doing that. And a lot of people trust his opinion. So I think part of that was, Vince just didn't think it was going to go over well, doing it Bret's way. And it probably wouldn't have. And that's why,
you don't think it would have gone over better than what happened, though?
No, not really, because
so the match going on for 2 minutes, or however long it was, a couple minutes, right? And then Shawn Michaels puts Bret Hart in the sharpshooter, and the ref just calls for the bell when Vince is outside telling him to ring the bell. Like, I don't know how that is a better scenario than them having a great match and it ends in a draw.
Well, how long was that match? Wasn't that match like going on for like a half hour at least, so 20 minutes?
No, it was a real short match.
Was it that short?
Yep, the first opportunity to end that match, they were going to take it.
Trying to remember, I thought, okay, how long was that match?
In fact, Bret had already been told backstage, A lot of his colleagues kick out at 1. Don't kick out at 2. Because they felt there'll be some type of fast count or something to declare Shawn Michaels the winner. So there was already that whole thing happening. But my thing is, there has to be a better way to handle that situation than, yeah, we'll just screw him that night. That's just my opinion. But
yeah. Well, again, it made for a lot of controversy.
It did.
It kind of hyped things up a little bit. It ignited the Monday Night Wars. So, controversy sells, and a lot of people at the time when that was going on, they didn't know if it was work or if it was real. I didn't know it was a work right off the bat. Did you? Right? I mean, I didn't know it was real right off the bat. I thought it was a work.
Yeah. It was wrestling. There's always that. I mean, there's people till this day that say that whole thing was a work. And Bret and Vince got together and they're like, we're going to do this, but I don't believe that. But yeah, it's the controversy sold, but I don't think that was by design, though. I don't think that was Vince's intention. He made the most of it, and Vince is great at that. And the Vince McMahon character was born, and that character that he built, you feuded with Stone Cold, and that's what eventually won the Monday Night Wars. But what I'm trying to say is, out of everything Vince could have done, knowing months in advance that Bret's going to be leaving, I refuse to believe that he didn't have a better scenario, to get that belt off of Bret.
Yeah, it probably could have been done better.
I
think it's fair to say that. It is fair to say that. I mean,
now, I mean, one argument that's always said is, well, look, you want to get the belt off of Bret at a major pay-per-view. He won the title from the Undertaker at SummerSlam. So ideally, you want him to lose the title at Survivor Series. You don't want him to lose the title on some random show. But my thing is, he didn't have to lose to Shawn Michaels. Like, that's not something that had to happen. They could have made, at that time, they could have made Ken Shamrock champion. They could have made a lot of other guys champion. But this idea that it had to be Shawn Michaels, you could have gotten the belt on Michaels and then have him face Stone Cold. That was a plan for WrestleMania, but it could have been handled in so many different ways. In my opinion, especially, I think Bret did have a little bit of say just because he's the one that got told, I want to break the contract, Didn't
he have some sort of creative control over his character too?
Yes, he did. Yes.
So, but not only that too, my whole thing is this, like, Bret was leaving anyways. So why did it really even matter? Leaving anyways.
Yeah.
That's what I just can't wrap my head around.
Because he didn't like Shawn Michaels. That's why.
But he never had to see him again. So, like, let me just get this whole guy, get this out of my life, and this is just another chapter that I move on to bigger and better things. Fuck it, who cares? It's like when you're leaving a job, like you're already thinking about your next move. You're more concerned about your next move. You're not looking behind. You're looking forward. That's the way I look at it.
I could see why. I mean, it's kind of like when we quit a job or get fired or whatnot. Like, you're just told to leave, and I get your point, right? Then you leave, right? That's a fair point. But you're not asked to kiss a coworker's ass before you go. Like you're not asked to. Oh, before you go though, we need you to do a favor for this coworker you don't like. Let's put a little bit of salt in the wound. So, I mean, first of all, let me put it this way. If Bret really wanted to, all you had to do was fake an injury like Shawn Michaels did. So he could have gotten a doctor's letter and, so Bret has an issue with his ankle. He's not going to be able to wrestle for a couple months. He could have done that.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that, right? He did want to go out with a great match and everything. but he just didn't want to do it against Shawn Michaels. Vince had a whole roster of guys. I mean, he had a young Rock there. Maybe Rock wasn't ready, you know, but he had Stone Cold. Stone Cold was red hot.
Yeah, he was.
But I also get the argument that it's his company. It's at the end of the day, it's Vince's company, right? So, you know, but he's the one paying the guys at the end of the day. But I think Vince was just put in a bad spot. But and I think he hindsight's 20/20. But ironically, I don't think he would change anything because that whole controversy turned a lot of things around for him, you know. But I also think it kind of deflated Bret Hart, you know. It's when he went to WCW. Eric Bischoff even said, like, it wasn't even the same guy I talked to when I was negotiating a deal with him. He was like a whole nother guy, you know. Like a piece of him was gone. You know, it was like a shell of his former self. You know, by the time he arrived to WCW, he's always late. He didn't seem interested. He wasn't engaged backstage, and this whole Montreal Screw Job really did affect him. You know, it did have a profound effect on him. And I think it lasted. I think till this day, there's a bitterness there that whole thing happened.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He never let it go.
He never let it go. And even look, I'm with you 100% on the Bill Goldberg kick. I mean, there was no need for that, right?
Yeah.
But my thing is, right, if you go on record and tell everybody, I already forgave him, it's you know, what happened, and what's done is done, right?
Yeah.
You can't keep bringing it up, though. Like, you know, he keeps bringing it up.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But here's the next thing I want to say. What is Bret supposed to do if people keep asking him about Hogan, about Flair, about the Montreal Screw Job? Like, what is he supposed to say? I mean, he's not gonna tell a different story.
Well, he could just say, you know, I've had my issues. They're in the past now. I'm just looking forward to the future. These guys were even though I didn't see eye to eye with these guys all the time. These guys were excellent wrestlers, and they did very well for themselves in the business.
All right, so let's go one by one. Let's go with Flair. Flair has attacked Bret Hart nonstop for years, right?
Yeah, he deserves that. He deserves Flair. He can go at Flair, but Hogan doesn't really say anything about him. So I mean, I don't know why he goes at Hogan, but yeah, you're right. He can go at Flair.
Hogan is different though.
Flair is so two-faced. He's phony. A lot of people in the business have said the same things about Ric Flair. How he'll be a friend to your face and stab you in the back when you're not looking.
Yeah. Well, because Hogan's very passive aggressive. Like, he doesn't go around and just talk shit. You know what I mean? Like Flair does.
No.
But he does. Hogan is two-faced as well. You know, like it's
to some people, yeah.
You know, you can't go like let's take the Macho Man, right? Like, why is it the Macho Man got along with everybody, but it just when it came to Hogan, he just hated Hogan.
Yeah.
You know, like he just had this hatred for the guy. He wanted to fight him for real. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah.
He wanted to have an MMA fight, like for real, against Hulk Hogan and put it on pay-per-view. How much do you think that would have sold, by the way?
At least $1 million.
You think so? Wow.
Yeah, at least $1 million.
They're kind of past it though. But that's nuts. They would have probably made it a work, right? But it's Hogan is probably the best politician in the history of the business, right? Hogan could walk into a room with Vince McMahon and 9 out of 10 times convince Vince to change the call. Hogan was supposed to put over Mr. Perfect at Madison Square Garden for the title. It didn't happen. He convinced him to do otherwise. He talked Vince out of it. He has talked Vince out of so many things. And Hogan also, I don't know if he purposely lies or he just has a bad memory. It's one or the other. But the way he kind of talks about events never add up. Ever. Like when he says, I would respect him more if he just came out and said, yeah, I didn't want to put Bret Hart over. Okay. At that time, he was considered small and guys my size just didn't put over guys that size. If he was just honest and said that, I would respect him a lot more, because there's a lot of truth to that. But when he says, no, I love Bret. I would have put him over, but Vince didn't want me to. Like, who believes that? Nobody believes that. So you're going to go to Hollywood and you expect us to believe that Vince didn't want you for Bret to beat you at SummerSlam? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's
right?
Bullshit.
But he'll deny these things, and he'll deny things that were said by Warrior. He'll deny things said by other people, and they just never add up. His stories never add up. That's my thing with Hogan.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, given his popularity and all the other controversies Hogan's had, do you think I think this is true with any line of business, right? And in any, not just wrestling, but in sports and business or any job, right? But do you think because of his enormous popularity, to a certain degree, Hogan had a right to make some of these calls? Like, I don't want to put that guy over. I don't want to work with this guy. You think he was in a special privileged position, Hogan? Like he deserved that privilege?
No, I don't. I don't think he deserved that privilege because I think he abused it. I think he took it too far. I think once you get to a certain level, you're not obligated to, but I think you should start looking to help others. You should start mentoring other guys because a lot of guys in the business will point to someone that helped them along the way.
Yeah.
And Hogan, few people speak highly of Hogan, like King Kong Bundy, may he rest in peace. He said Hogan was very instrumental in helping him out in his career. Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Kevin Nash kind of liked Hogan, but he kind of understood that Hogan was for himself. He said that before, but he respected Hogan. But for the most part, most people didn't like Hogan. He put over one or two guys like that he liked, and that was it, and kind of shitted on everyone else. Kind of ratted out Jesse Ventura when Jesse Ventura wanted to get a union. So,
oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So I guess Hogan and Flair, I think, let the power get to them, and they became like megalomaniacs. I think both of them. You know. But for some reason, Flair kind of, I don't know. Who was worse, Flair or Hogan? It's hard to say.
They're both, because in their own way, right? So, and sometimes it's like that show Game of Thrones, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's to certain people you're a hero, to other people you're the worst person in the world. So it's So when Hogan before Hogan arrived to WCW, Booker T and what's his brother's name? Stevie Ray, I think is his name.
Stevie Ray, that's correct.
They had Harlem Heat. They were getting over with the crowd and everything. And Flair was the booker, and he was always giving them like the worst finishes imaginable, finishes that made no sense, like at all, right? And he wanted if I remember the story correctly, Stevie Ray was asked to hit his finisher on Macho Man and then have Macho Man kick out, right? And So before they went out there, Macho Man told him, "Hey, don't worry about it. When you hit me with a finisher, my tag team partner's going to hit you from behind, so that way I don't kick out of your finisher." Right? Now that doesn't seem like a big deal, but like you, right? You saw wrestling like back then, like that was a big deal back then, like somebody kicking out of your finisher, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, it was like a dick move by Flair. Like, that's literally that would be called killing somebody's finisher. You know?
Yeah.
You know, so some random dude just kicked out of it in a tag team match, you know? So anyway, so Macho Man like helped him out in that way, right? Because he was having beef with Flair, right? He knew what Flair was doing. But anyway, when Hogan came in, Hogan got a lot of control in the back, and he actually changed a lot of things and helped Harlem Heat, you know, get a bigger push. Okay, so that's why even after the whole leaked audio of Hogan came out, you know, where he said the N-word and all this other stuff, that's why Stevie Ray, you know, came out real strongly defending Hogan, right? But it just depends who you ask, man. It's no matter what position you're in, you have to help some people to keep yourself in power. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So to certain people that you did help out, you're the best person.
You need allies. Yeah, I guess you need allies to help you keep yourself in power to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
that makes sense.
My thing with Flair is that he'll say some things that are clearly his opinion, and he just states them as fact. So, and they're like nasty stuff. Like when he said like something like he didn't understand. Like he literally insinuated that Diamond Dallas Page only got over in WCW because Eric Bischoff was sleeping with his wife, right? Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's not the reason Diamond Dallas Page got over. He was over because he was over, okay? The crowd loved the guy, right? The people were going crazy for him when he was hitting the diamond cutter on the NWO. You remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like everybody acknowledged that. But, you know, he wants to go out and tell people he just doesn't. And he just says it in such a sneaky way. Like, oh, I mean, I like the guy. He's a really good person. I just don't get how he became a main eventer. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, he says. Like, what do you care, Flair? Like, what does he care how somebody else got their success or why they got a push or like, why is he hating that way? You know, I never understood why Flair does that. I really don't. But that's my thing with Flair. He's real inconsistent. He has changed in the last few years, you know, thankfully. But like I think he's a different person now than he was, let's say, just 5 years ago. But this guy, I mean, he said terrible things about Mick Foley. He said terrible things about a lot of people. And another one is Bret Hart. And this is the final thing I want to talk about. Ric Flair came out and he says, or has stated, and this is the reason Bret Hart talks shit about Flair, but Flair has come out and said in numerous occasions that Bret Hart he cannot be considered like a legend or anything significant in the business. He never did anything, right? Like he was never a draw. Vince got rid of him. He never did anything in WCW. Everywhere he went, he was not a success, right? Do you agree with Ric Flair's sentiments or some of his sentiments in that, as blunt as he's been?
No, Ric Flair's full of shit. Come on, what do you mean he wasn't a draw? Of course he was a draw. You know, and I like the rebuttal. A lot of people, because Randy Savage wasn't really a big Ric Flair guy either, and
No.
A lot of people say, you know, you see one Ric Flair match, you see them all. And it's kind of true, isn't it? I mean, he does do the same things over and over again. Yeah. There's not much of a right. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep.
Randy Savage, I think you could argue, was probably the most skilled wrestler out there because he just did so many different things. No, I should not say the most. He was the most creative
It was good.
wrestler out there.
Yeah.
He did like all his matches were like you never knew what was going to happen. He was like an awesome wrestler, Randy Savage. Him and Jimmy Snuka, I think, in terms of just great matches, like real memorable matches. Those guys were great wrestlers.
That's true. I mean, I liked his elbow drop off the top rope. I mean, in 2018, you have wrestlers now that do all these flips and all this other crazy shit. But Randy Savage's elbow drop, though, when you look at it, it actually looks like he's landing his elbow. Like it looks like he's literally landing his elbow on the dude's ribcage.
And then how he would like just jump out of the ring and just do crazy shit outside the ring. Like his matches were awesome.
Yeah. Best promos ever, undeniable voice. You tell anybody, "Ooh, yeah," they know what you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah. Randy Savage was definitely up there for sure. I mean, it's to me where Flair, I think to me anyway, was Flair a bigger draw than Bret? I honestly argue it depends. It depends when. So Flair was a big draw in the territory era, when the territories were established and he was being given the NWA championship to travel around the country and wrestle different guys from different territories.
Yeah.
But all that was established. Now, credit to him, he was drawing, okay? But he wasn't drawing anything. Like when he was in WCW, nobody was tuning in to watch him. They were tuning in to watch the NWO.
Yeah.
They were tuning in to watch Hogan, not him. It's when he went to you mentioned earlier, right? When he had that brief stint with the WWF. Yeah. He was not drawing money. That's the reason he only lasted like a year and a half there. He didn't draw the money Vince thought he would. He wasn't a big draw in the Northeast.
You said a very, very intelligent thing that I think you were spot on with it. Bret Hart was popular everywhere he went. Whereas Ric Flair, he was only popular in certain territories, certain areas, like in the South. Yeah. Ric Flair didn't carry over to the East Coast. A lot of people didn't really like him.
I mean, I still laugh when I there's this interview where Flair's like, I mean, Bret never wrestled in St. Louis, and I had to stop and think to myself, like Bret Hart wrestled. And this is ironic because I always make fun of the English fans because of this, what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. Bret Hart wrestled in a sold-out Wembley Stadium, okay? And not like in boxing, like in wrestling, that's actually like a thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like selling out a stadium, that's what they do their WrestleManias at, So this whole thing that he never wrestled in St. Louis, I know a lot about wrestling. I don't understand the significance of that. Do you?
No.
What is it about St. Louis that's so significant?
He wrestled in huge arenas.
Madison Square Garden. I don't get it. I don't know what he means by that, but.
I mean, where did they used to wrestle? Like the WCW guys, like in the Omni or something like that?
It was they were based out of Georgia, right?
Yeah.
So, the Georgia Dome for big events, but that was mostly like there was a time where they were doing Nitro was doing. Do you remember when they had like 4 or 5 straight weeks of doing shows in domes? Yeah. Not arenas, but domes, like in the Georgia Dome. But when Flair was in his prime, I mean, they wouldn't really touch the Northeast. That was Vince's territory. They were only WWF was allowed to do Madison Square Garden, places like the Boston. I don't know do you remember WCW at the Boston Garden?
Very, very, very rarely.
Because that's Vince's territory over there.
Yeah. I don't remember them being there. No.
Yeah, Flair is not. If you ask somebody in the South, they'll tell you something different. They'll say, Flair is the biggest thing of all time. You know what I mean? But from their perspective, he probably is. But the reality is, you ask somebody that's not from the South, they know who Ric Flair is, but I'm going to be 100% honest here, right?
Yeah.
If Flair didn't have his run, this last run he had with WWF, with WWE, where when he got with Triple H and Evolution, and then he had his last match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. They gave him a big send off, and then they put him in the Hall of Fame. If that never happened, very few people would know who Ric Flair is. It's very few. Like, only people that followed territory wrestling would really understand the significance of Ric Flair. So he owes a lot of the people that know him a lot. Okay, he owes a lot of that to the WWE. He really does. Bret Hart broke from the WWE in '97. They still know who he is. Bret Hart was popular in Canada. There's no wrestler that was more popular than him in Canada. Northeast, he was popular. You can say in the South that's probably his weak point, but that's just not Vince's territory, But when they went to overseas, he was very popular in England. He was very popular for some reason, I don't know why, he's very popular in Germany. I don't know why, but right, but he's well known in Europe. So yeah, no doubt. Now, I did want to touch here on the whole Owen Hart thing. All right, and I want to tell this because I want your outsider's perspective on this. All right. So Owen Hart, as I'm sure everybody knows, had a tragic accident. Okay. He fell from the ceiling and landed in the ring. I believe like on the ring apron or the turnbuckle, one or the other. I don't remember. But at the end of the day, he died. Okay. Passed away. And there was a terrible accident, terrible tragedy. WWE has been wanting to put Owen Hart in the Hall of Fame for years now. They've been wanting to put him in the Hall of Fame. Right? The reason he's not in the Hall of Fame is because the wife, the widow of Owen Hart, will not grant them her wishes to, right? She's not accepting the Hall of Fame induction, in name of her husband, Now, in her mind, and I could understand why she feels this way, but she feels like the company forced him in that position, and I guess in her mind, they murdered her husband. From her perspective, that's how she feels, right? The backstory is that Owen Hart was asked to do a storyline where he was going to have an affair with another woman. Okay. Owen had told Vince Russo, the writer at the time, that he did not want to do this storyline because he's married and his kids watch the show. He said, I'm fair game for just about anything, but I don't know about kissing another woman live on the air. Right? They told him no problem. And it's believed that as punishment, they then gave him the gimmick of the blue blazer, where he puts on a mask and a goofy suit, okay, and comes off of the top of the rafters down to the ring and acts like an idiot, pretty much. So that's pretty much what the character was. From my understanding, Owen hated this character. He did not like to play this character, but he did it. It's also my understanding that Owen was scared of heights. It was well known that he was scared of heights. WWE knew he was scared of heights. He did not want to do the stunt. He didn't feel comfortable doing the stunts, but he did it. And the reason he did it was, from my understanding, because he didn't want to say no to the company twice. He already told them, I'm not going to do an affair, so he didn't want to say no to them again. With that said, given that story, the widow is not accepting the Hall of Fame induction. She also is refusing to allow WWE to use footage of Owen Hart to make a DVD of him, or Blu-ray, not like they call them nowadays. Bret Hart actually has come out and said that he's all for Owen being in the Hall of Fame. And if he's not in the Hall of Fame, it just basically Bret has said, his words, okay, that I believe her name is Martha, is erasing the name of Owen Hart from the record books if she keeps insisting that he's not going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, right? Bret has gone on record, okay? This is the widow of his brother, by the way, but he's gone on record to say that he disagrees with the widow of Owen Hart, that the right call is to put him in the Hall of Fame, that she is acting immature at this point, that it's a tragedy that he misses his brother as well, but at the end of the day, it was an accident. He wasn't murdered, as she is insisting he was. So anyway, I just kind of want your thoughts on that regarding this whole tragedy of Owen Hart, and not that it's our place or it is or whatever, but do you think the WWE would be right to just put him in the Hall of Fame anyway, or do you think they should actually get the wishes or the blessing, I should say, of the widow?
I think they should respect the wishes of the widow.
Right.
And to be honest with you,
yep.
I'm torn. I don't know who's right and who's wrong in this situation, because Bret Hart wants him to be in the Hall of Fame. That's his brother, but then his wife is very hurt from how the whole thing went down. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if this is true or not, but I also heard that Bret Hart did not want to do that move from the rafters because, as you said, he was afraid of heights, and he wasn't really. Right. Oh, excuse me, Owen. I apologize, Owen. Owen did not want to do that move from the rafters because he was afraid of heights and stuff, and he was never comfortable doing that, and they basically really were forceful in having him do that. I'm not saying they threatened his job or anything like that, but I guess from what I understand, they're really adamant about him doing that, and they really tried hard to convince him to do that, and he really never wanted to do it in the first place. He didn't like the whole gimmick to begin with, and I think he would say that to his wife too, from what I understand, that they would have discussions about it.
Yeah, he didn't want to do it, but since he already said no, I'm not gonna kiss another woman or have an affair with another woman, even though it's not real, right? But still, he just didn't feel comfortable doing that, and with his kids watching on TV, or whatever, right? So he already said no to that, and then to turn around and say, "No, I don't want to do this either." It's you're not going to get the push that you need, right? So I guess one could always say, well, maybe he felt coerced into, doing it, even though he didn't want to. But I think it is fair to say, of course, that it was a tragic accident. It's not like they purposely, cut the cord on his way down or something like that. You know what I mean?
No, but I think she was interviewed one time.
Yep.
And she said that they would talk about how he didn't like doing it. So I don't know.
I mean, it's a tough situation, and I agree with you. If I was at WWE, there's no way, because that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, that I induct Owen without the blessing of the widow. There's just no way, and there's no talking her into it. By the way, I mean, the Hart family because the Hart family wants him in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
But she's just adamant that since the funeral, she said that there's going to be a day of reckoning. I don't know what that means, but she is hell bent on. I don't know what it is at this point because we're already in the year 2018, right? I mean, this happened in '98, so I don't know, or 2000, whenever it was. I'm not sure what she's waiting on, or it's just one of those, like, she just wants nothing to do with this company. But it's a tough situation because I get it. Even if you feel, and it's very understandable that they forced him into this and all that. This was the profession of her husband his whole life. This is what he did. And they just want to honor him for what he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the tough part. So I don't know. I've heard rumors that they're working on some. You know what I mean? But maybe they'll go the Bruno route. You know what they did with Bruno Sammartino, right?
I heard that they had some issues with him, but then they ended up letting him come into the Hall of Fame.
Well, they wanted him in the Hall of Fame. He kept saying no, though.
Yeah.
Like, Bruno's like, nah, I don't want him in the Hall of Fame. Bruno
That's
had
right.
this dude got in with conditions. Like, you know, like he's like, you got to prove to me that steroids are out of wrestling, and like they had to do a lot of stuff. Like, and then on top of that, it's also rumored that they cut a nice check. So
he asked him for money too.
I'm pretty sure he got paid for that. But anyway, Beeb, this is a great discussion here. You have any final thoughts?
Well, you know, you've made some good, strong points here, and I think that you put up a good argument. I kind of went one way and you went the other way, but I could totally see your side of the argument. And you know, it's a sad thing that what happened to Bret, because he had to lose. You know, he lost his brother. Then I guess I don't think he's married anymore. I think he divorced his wife. They got divorced. That didn't work out. And you know, he's still doing interviews now, and he had some issues health wise too. And he took a stroke, right?
Oh yeah, he had a bike accident where he fell face first somehow. That ended up causing a stroke. Yep.
Yeah, so he's had some issues throughout the course of his life, and I just hope
he had I don't know what it's called. So maybe you could think of it, but when Goldberg kicked him, right?
Yeah.
And his head bounced out a part of whatever connects like kind of like the end of the spine, kind of to like your neck.
Oh yeah, the brain stem or something like that.
It actually tore, right? Which is that's why you have to retire. No doctor was going to give him the clearance, you know, at that point.
Yeah.
And then when he had that bike accident, it just made it worse. That eventually led to to him having a stroke. So he's been through some tough times, that's for sure.
So I just hope everything works out for the guy. He's had a lot of bad luck, and I don't think he deserves that. I think he deserves a lot better, and I hope. And sometimes I feel bad even criticizing him because of all the bad things that probably happened to him in his life. That's going to contribute to the way he feels. But I just hope he can find peace with himself. That's all.
Well, that is true. And on a good note, it looks like him and Shawn Michaels actually, you know, buried the hatchet and have actually conducted interviews together and stuff like that. So at least that part of the whole animosity thing is gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he goes to WWE events now and stuff like that. So it's definitely better than it was a couple years ago. That's for sure. Right.
Okay.
Yep. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that, guys. This is D-Style. And we came in late. Listen on archive. Peace.
All right.